Hi, I'm Maddie Gainey. I will be talking about the beluga whale, which is also known as the sea canary, and I'll explain why it's also called that later on in this presentation. And its genus species is Delphinaptors lucus. To continue talking about the beluga whale's scientific classifications, its kingdom is Animalia, its phylum is Chordata, its class is Mammalia, its order is Cetacea, its family is Monodontidae, its genus is Delphinaptors, and its species is lucus. Some other common names that it goes by are obviously beluga whale, melonhead, and sea canary. So it gets its name beluga whale from the Russian word bielo, which translates white, so white whale. Melonhead, it's called melonhead because of its melon-shaped head that allows it to make certain sounds and use something called echolocation, which I'll again talk about later. And it's called sea canary because it seems to have a song like a canary bird when it makes its noises and its whistles and sounds when it's using echolocation and communicating with other beluga whales. Beluga whales live in the Arctic Ocean and colder seas surrounding parts of Alaska, Canada, Russia, and Greenland. This is because they have a very thick layer of blubber on them, and so it allows them to live in these cold waters. Beluga whales are very interesting creatures. So there was a lot of interesting facts that I could have included in this presentation, but for time's sake, I had to narrow it down to the most interesting. So one really cool fact that I learned while doing research was that there was a beluga whale that was reported to have mimicked human speech. So this whale's name was Nock. It was part of a Navy program, and there were two Navy divers making repairs. And while they were underwater making these repairs, they were next to Knox's enclosure. They were using a wet phone, which was like a communication device that was allowed them to be able to talk with each other under the water. And after a period of time lapsed, the divers immediately surfaced because they heard "get out, out, out." And when the divers surfaced from the water and they asked the supervisor, like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, why'd you ask us to get out?" It actually they came to find out that it was not making these noises. He had learned how to replicate what these humans had been saying to each other. So another cool fact is that belugas use echolocation and bubbles to communicate with each other. So echolocation occurs when an animal, or in this case a beluga, emits a sound wave that then bounces off another object, and it returns an echo that provides information about that object's distance and size. And this is actually seen in the movie Finding Dory, when the beluga whale Bailey is making like a ooh, ooh, ooh sound. And after he makes that sound, it bounces off of the tunnel that Dory's in, and he's able to help her navigate through the pipes so that she can find her family. And belugas also use bubbles to communicate. Scientists have found that slow little bubbles tend to be belugas showing their like playful attitude, and then sudden bursts of bubbles seem to be a warning or a defensive reaction to something that startled them. And again, another fun fact about belugas is that unlike any other whale or dolphin, they have an extremely flexible neck because their vertebrae are not fused at the neck. So it allows them to rotate their head side to side, up and down, and to easily navigate under ice. Not only are there a lot of unique facts about beluga whales' attributes, but there's also a lot of ecological facts about beluga whales that are very interesting. So the average lifespan of a beluga whale is around 35 to 50 years. However, they can live to be as old as 90 years old. This is because of something called GLGs, which stand for growth layer groups, and this is similar to how you date a tree using tree rings. So it's not exact, it's more of an approximation. So this works because beluga's teeth acquire different layers of growth, and so these layers are used to date the belugas. So the oldest beluga on record had approximately 80 GLGs, which could mean that beluga was actually older than 80 years old. Belugas mate in the late winter and spring, and females give birth every 2 to 3 years because their pregnancies last 15 months, which is insanely long. When it's time for beluga females to give birth, they actually migrate to summer areas because the water is warmer, and their calves are not born with a thick layer of blubber like they already, or that the adults possess. And if they didn't migrate to these warmer waters, the calves would actually not survive. So belugas are not picky eaters. They eat a variety of marine organisms such as octopus, squid, crabs, clams, shrimp, snails, sandworms, salmon, cod, herring, flatfish, smelt, and several different other creatures that I did not have the space or the time to list in this presentation. So while beluga whales eat a lot of different things, there's also a lot of different creatures that eat belugas, sadly. Killer whales being one of those creatures, polar bears, and even humans have been known to eat belugas, mostly humans that live in the Arctic regions. Belugas were once a very numerous species. However, due to lots of different factors, belugas are now an endangered species. So some of these factors include commercial and sports fishing, which is now illegal because belugas are endangered. There's been radiation and contaminants that have made their way into the water that belugas inhabit, and so in return, these contaminants have gotten into belugas, their bodies, and it's actually called cancer and caused them to die. This has also affected the food that belugas eat, so if they're not having enough food, they're not able to feed and not able to produce healthy young, which increases their numbers. And one of the main reasons that belugas have actually started to decline is because of something called noise or sound pollution. And since we've learned that echolocation is extremely important to belugas, and how they navigate, how they communicate with each other, and just how they live their daily lives, when different sea vessels make their way into the waters that belugas inhabit, they emit different sounds, and so belugas are not able to properly echolocate, and this sound actually causes, or the sound that is released from these sea vessels actually causes stress on the belugas, and we humans know that stress is not a fun thing and can impact several different areas of our life, and so the same is true for belugas. There's not an actual estimate or study that was done on the decline of belugas worldwide, but there was one done in the Cook Inlet in Alaska. So from 1979 to 2018, the beluga population in the Cook Inlet declined by 80%. So over almost 40 years, the belugas declined by 80%. So this actually was from 1,300 whales to 279, which is crazy. It is literally insane that the belugas went from that many whales to, in just this small little area, to that few whales in what now is a really big area of them because there's so little of them. And so I think it's really important to learn about beluga whales and just about all these marine creatures in general, and what is threatening them, so that we can maybe try and help them, especially something as sweet and cute and interesting and beautiful and just unique as beluga whales. Since beluga whales live in the Arctic Ocean, which is full of lots of ice and extremely cold water, they have to have several different unique attributes which allow them to live in these extreme conditions. So as I mentioned previously, the beluga whale's genus name is Delphinapterus. The Greek word delphin means dolphin, and apterus means without fin. So Delphinapterus literally translates with dolphin without fin. And this is because belugas do not have a dorsal fin. Instead, they have like a dorsal ridge-like structure on their back, and it allows them to easily swim and maneuver under thick ice. Again, I mentioned earlier that belugas have a thick layer of fat called blubber, but it actually makes up 40 to 60% of their body weight, which is roughly half, and that's insane. So again, I mentioned earlier that belugas' necks are extremely flexible because their neck vertebrae are not fused. So unlike dolphins or any other whale, they can easily move their head from side to side or up and down or rotate it. And this again allows them to maneuver through the ice. And they also lack a beak, which other whales and dolphins have, and instead they have their melon-shaped head, which allows them to use echolocation to communicate with other belugas and to navigate through the ice and the cold water.